I am sure that by now we have all heard of attachment theory. And if not, where have you been? Is the question. Okay. Attachment theory has been all the rage at least the last 5 years. At least attachment theory came on the rise with the rise of the pandemic, the rise of COVID-19, because so many therapists began to get on Instagram and TikTok. And with that came a lot of theories and studies and terms that you would have only heard if you had immersed yourself within likely either that field or the self development field. Now, you have all sorts of people running around talking about attachment theory and narcissism and gaslighting and all these things that have come to the forefront because of the pandemic and people getting online to make their content and to push their content out to the world. And though I see good and bad in all of it, I think attachment theory has been one of the loudest. I have heard more people talk about what their attachment style is as it comes to relationships than I had ever heard anyone talk about attachment styles. Now, attachment styles have been around since the 50s, but I think for the vast majority of people, it feels like a really new thing. Let me also say that I am a fan of attachment styles myself because I, like many of you, was able to see myself in some pieces and say, girl, we need to work on that. We need to work on that. And I have, and a lot of times what people will do is discover their attachment styles, and then they would lean on that like a crutch. They would lean on that as an excuse as to why they are the way they are, or an excuse as to why they do the things they do. But the point of it is to really work towards going from simple as pie, a secure attachment or insecure attachment, to a secure attachment. And the more I studied attachment style and the more I saw the difference healing and moving from insecure to secure was able to change my life and how I saw the world, I began to then see the same resemblance when it came to my clients and money. And so I have created the attachment styles between you and your money. This is going to be a 4-part series all this month that is coming out to the Alliance, to the highest level of Alliance, SQL. And we are breaking down every single one of the attachment styles so that you can see yourself in it and do the same thing I've done on the level of relationships and partnerships. And that's go from insecure to secure. So, with that being said, let's hop right on in it. All right, guys, as I'm sure you can figure out by this point, just even listening to my introductory conversation, my introduction of it, these attachment styles are literally only broken down into 2 categories. And within the categories, are the different styles, and the categories are secure and insecure. And what's quite interesting is the number of people who are walking around with a secure attachment style when it comes to relationships and our connections, you would think would far surpass connection style with money. The one thing though is money is such a pain point and topic of conversation for so many people. More people are walking around in insecure attachment with money than with people. Go figure. Yes, you drinking chai. Nice warm mug of chai. Actually, let me put it on. I have like this little tea coffee heater thing. Let's get that going. Actually, if you really want to dig into it, you can have a very secure style with how your upbringing was so that your relationship with intrapersonal relationships with partners and friendships may be secure, but your relationship with money is an absolute disaster. And so I think that really digging into this and us really uncovering what each of those attachment styles look like when it comes to your relationship with money, and you being able to see yourself will easily be able help you to be able to look at that and say, let me start moving towards the secure side. You'll be able to see yourself when you're making specific decisions and actions, when you're thinking a certain way around money, about money, and when certain things pop up for you that are actually those telltale signs that you have insecure attachment, and then specifically the ones that we're talking about. So let's dig into the first one for this week. This is actually the only week that is going to be open to the public. So you may be listening to this on my podcast, Your Rich Life. You may be seeing this on Instagram or TikTok. I don't know where you're seeing it, but it's the only one that you will be seeing in public spaces in its totality. And then the others will be locked. But today we are sticking with anxious attachment to money. All right, let's get into it. Now, the interesting thing about the anxious attached when it comes to money is that I think this is the one insecure attachment style that most people will think is secure. This is the one that I think unconsciously, or maybe even consciously, people see and they're like, that's what I want to work towards. I think this is the one that people see or have like idealized or romanticized this idea of what it means. And they think they'll be more disciplined, that means they're more disciplined and more responsible because oftentimes it comes off as looking that way. And so it's a prime example of how we can live in um, insecurity and in a unhealthy pattern, but society has held that pattern on a pedestal for so long that people think it is the way to go. So the easiest way for me to describe what anxious attachment will look like, I want to start backwards because often those who are anxiously attached to money have like the best savings. Go figure, right? Now, I want you to think about what I said about how we hold certain things on pedestals. Think about it. Think about, a penny saved is a penny earned. Wasn't that the same? Who was that? Booker T. Washington? I don't remember. Maybe I should have looked that up first. But think about how, even if your family didn't do it, how we prize saving, right? So much so to even being like penurious, like you're not letting anything out. You're just taking it all in, almost being stingy. I won't call any names just in case I'm still friends and know these people. But I remember growing up and my mother mentioned something about like a family friend who always like had some savings. Like they always had money. Like I feel like we would all know those people. They always have money. But you wouldn't say they always had money because they had like the newest cars or houses or clothes or things. It was because they were so stingy. They were kind of stingy with their money. They were always budgeting, but not budgeting in the sense that I talk about budgeting. When I talk about budgeting, I am having a conversation about making a plan with your money because money likes assignments. But when I speak about budgeting with these people, it is they can only allow themselves to use a certain amount of money and they will suffer to a certain degree. They will buy, you know, rice that only has two factors, underdone or overdone, because it's not a very good quality rice. They will rather buy something that is a lower quality to save money than to get the good thing, because the saving, the having is more important to them. For a lot of people, and a lot of people call these people cheap. Okay, like cheap is like a word that you may have thought for them, or they even call themselves in joke. I mean, and it's interesting because the person my mother was talking about, her daughter is my friend. We grew up together, and she's the exact same way. It's actually pretty dang on funny. And also, there's things you can learn. Like, I think we can learn from everyone. I think just because you don't necessarily agree or something may not come from a healthy place, we can learn from a lot of places. But she's very similar. So, one of the things that you will discover is um, how these things aren't necessarily genetic, but the habits have been passed down. Okay. So we would often call these people cheap. Like, oh, they're cheap. They're not going to do this. It's like, oh, because that costs too much. Like everything costs too much, out of the budget, can't afford it. And they will literally have thousands of dollars in an account. They are stingy with themselves. They're like everything, because this is where we get into why it's dangerous and unhealthy, because ultimately they live in constant fear. I'm going to repeat that. Anxious attached lives in constant fear, typically of not having enough. Now, one thing you're going to notice from week to week is there are some things that you're going to see that's in common, but the way people deal with them are completely different. And I think it's fascinating once you recognize it. It's fascinating how people handle things completely different, right? Based upon their programming. Programming's my thing, right? They are in constant fear. I have my notes here so I don't forget anything. ADHD over here will forget in the middle of what we're talking about. So, fear of not enoughness and fear that money won't always be there. The interesting thing is these people likely did not grow up with actual insecurity. They likely had nice homes. Their parents went to work. Their parents had secure jobs. These were typically middle class children, right? And sometimes even upper middle class kids. These are kids who their parents often leaned in on the conversation of saving and how important saving is and how important it is to be pioneers. That is a very interesting thing. This is normal, and this attachment style tends to be taught. Not always, not always, but it tends to be taught. You very often in this attachment style oversave, you're very cheap, and you won't allow anything to go out, but it also limits how much can come in. The reason it limits how much can come in, because what you will often find about this attachment style as well is they don't invest. There is so much fear around investing. Why do you think that is? Because it's the fear of losing. It's the fear that it won't be there. But what you can count on is your savings. What you can count on is if you put it in a savings account, even if it's just a high yield savings account, I will always at least have this piece. These people are leaving wealth on the table because we know overall, at least over the last 30 years, the market has increased at least 10% every single year. So these people are leaving money on the table. And even with that data, even with that knowledge, they are way too fearful to invest. And if they try to invest, it will be a very small amount. And they tend to leave it in there. And they're the people who will watch it And if the market starts to fall, they'll pull it out and say, see, I told you this doesn't work. The market goes up and down. That's just what the market does. It's over the course of the full year, you should notice at least a 10% return. But if you're watching it every day and it's constantly doing this, it's doing this from morning to evening, right? Then you get nervous. Those tend to be those people. Those also tend to be the people who are fearful of going into businesses unless it's a business like, they're a physician and they started their own practice. And even within that, they actually prefer being in other people's practice, or a lawyer, an attorney who, again, started your own practice. But typically, they want to be within someone else's firm and working towards partner. The security is what's important to them. Safety and security. And again, if you're on the outside looking in, because they, just like how they grew up, have homes, nice homes, but they're not going to be living above their means, babes. They're not going to. They have nice homes, which is a great thing, right? Remember, I told you can learn from everyone. They have nice homes. They drive dependable cars. Their kids are in, nice schools, good schools. From the outside in, it tends to look good. But these people don't do any extras. And so much so that it's living in a state of non-enjoyment. They literally work to do like the basics that's necessary within their home and their family. And it's one thing if your salary doesn't allow for you to ever do anything, but this is more so, I've chosen to not, because I fear not being secure and not being safe. Those tend to be anxious, attached to money people. Your desire for safety and security is so powerful that this is how it tends to manifest externally. And though it's difficult, it's one of the more difficult ones to see. The ones next week, oh, it's going to be like, yeah, I know a few of those. This one tends to be a little bit more difficult to see, but there is always the result that's there. The person listening to this, you'll know if it's you. You may not be able to hear this and instantly know if it's someone else unless you've been knowing them. Like I said, I know it's my friend and I know it's her fan. Like I've been knowing them literally all my life. So I just happen to know that. But if you're like your newer friends, you guys don't talk intimately in detail about each other's life. These are things you may not know. You may not know that they're literally sacrificing, because there's an underlying fear that exists there. They want to start businesses. You may want to start businesses. You may want to invest. Like, this may be something you want to do so bad, but what if it doesn't work? What if it fails? You may want to invest in real estate. You may have had opportunities that have come up for you, and everything to you tends to feel too good to be true. Because all that really is true and all that we really know is our safety and security of our savings. And it's interesting because I know a couple people who may have $1 million months and absolutely would never invest their money in like the market. Even though, again, we have 30 years of data to say long-term wealth creation, for the vast majority, that's the only way you're going to get it. And for those who create wealth, that's the only way they keep it. You are not finding any wealthy individuals who have not invested in the market. And it's easy to see. And the most, until the person desires to heal their attachment style to money, it's nothing you can do. It has to be a personal choice. So my question is, do you see yourself in any of this? Just for a little bit of recap, anxious attachment style to money tends to be people who grew up mostly secure, meaning they have a stable environment, home, parents, food on the table, loved, those things. It often shows up around low self-esteem and confidence when it comes to money. Even when you're able to make money, it's like a constant, I have to get more, because there is a fear of not being safe and secure. They often need the reassurance that they are safe and secure when it comes to money. And the reassurance is, I'm going to make more money, or let me make sure I'm constantly saving it so I can see it. Right. And you are very suspicious of opportunities and things that really can lead you to long term wealth. So you're really holding your hand like this, so not a lot goes out. We would call these people often cheap or stingy. Even if they're not cheap with themselves, they tend to be very stingy. They're not out doing for other people. No, which is very interesting, because the wealthiest individuals don't talk about what they do, but they actually tend to give millions. And people who actually have extra money, like they can't, because there's that insecurity that exists within them of not having enough, of not having that money. And so it's like only so much. One of the people I'm talking about, I know, like, they have created so much success for themselves. And I told a friend I wouldn't ask them for $1. Absolutely not. They just are not that person. They are not that person by any means that I would ever go to. Um, and often this person does have a savings. And even if you don't have a savings today, maybe you've created that savings and something happened, like you were laid off, you lost your job, something happened, and you had to use that savings. And then you said something along the line, see, this is why I always save. Right. And so, because of the way programming works, our life gives us experiences to prove our beliefs correct, regardless of what the beliefs are. That's why the person that believes that that's necessary is right. And so is the person who believes it's not. You're both right. All right. So ask yourself, does this sound like me? And stick in this for the series, because you may find I got a little trick in here that you're more than one. And that can happen. And by the end, we're going to talk about how to move to secure attachment with money. This was really fun. If you are not inside of the SQL level of the Alliance, you can go to yourrichlifemedia.com. Just scroll down, you'll see the button for the Alliance. Depending on where you're watching this, there may be a button somewhere around it. Or if you're listening to the podcast, it's in the description. I don't know, just look around. It's around, or it is, just go to yourrichlifemedia.com, scroll down, the Alliance, and you'll be able to sign up. You get access to our online app, which includes a community where you can get in there and chat. I'm in there chatting all the time, like a YouTube type. Maybe I shouldn't call it YouTube, but think YouTube or Netflix of videos and wealth documentaries. You have trainings from me around wealth programming, money, mindset, subconscious, which we know are different, subliminals, like all sorts of stuff. So if you are really in a space of not just you want to learn just about this, but you want to learn how to really shift your programming and then shift your relationship with money, you want to be a part of the Alliance. If you have any questions, it's always ways to DM me, or you can just email me at Stephanie@StephanieSynclair.com. At least that's the email right now. If at a later date it shoots back, it's Stephanie@yourrichlifemedia.com. All right. Talk to you guys next week.